I'm going to take an Instagram picture of you guys. That's cool, because my mom doesn't believe I'm speaking to this many people. This is the way we communicate, right? We don't really do conferences. The way Artists for Israel talks is through Instagram, it's through social media, it's through writing our message big on walls and singing it and putting it in ways that you don't really get. So the whole Instagram thing, while it is somewhat for my mom, really? You can't hear me? I'm loud. It's realistic because it's how we communicate. So my name is Craig Dershowitz. I am the Executive Director of Artists for Israel. Seth is one of the co-founders. Alicia Post is somewhere here, and she's one of the co-founders. There was about 8 of us, and I won't bore you with how we started, but it involved a lot of nudity and a lot of people covered in paint. And we'll leave it at that. So I am distantly related to Alan, which is the first question I get all the time. Only distantly, we've never met each other. While he was in places like this, it's a library, I was in places like this. I grew up in Brooklyn, I grew up in Coney Island. This is not the Coney Island that your kids and grandkids go to. This was David Dinkins' crack era Coney Island. It was a very different community. Actually famously once tried to introduce someone from Coney Island to Gil, and it was trying to get this guy through security at the consulate. It was hysterical, but we'll talk about that later. He was like covered in tattoos, like anyway. And it was at Coney Island that you started to learn a way of communicating to the rest of the world that is not necessarily the way that a lot of the Jewish advocacy groups, a lot of the Israeli advocacy groups, a lot of the people who, and I know this is, I'm not going to get into politics. I swore I'm not going to get into politics. I'm just going to get into process of politics, which is we started thinking, or I've been thinking since a young age, about how do we communicate a message. I'm not going to talk about the message. I'm just going to talk about how we get to the message. So anyway, I love this picture because it's so scandalous in so many ways. So coming out of that environment, I actually got a job at Morgan Stanley, and I was wearing a suit every day, and I was hating my life. And at the same time, I became the creative director, and then eventually a part owner of a magazine called Bombing Magazine. Bombing Magazine talked about little kids holding guns. I'm not going to lie. It talked about sex, drugs, rap, not so much rock and roll, but punk music maybe, skateboard culture, all of that. And it was a testing ground for an organization that later started called Artists for Israel. And where it was a testing ground was, as a Jew who was proud of Israel, I had started noticing that in these cultures, the skateboarding, hip-hop, graffiti, urban art, whatever culture, there was a lot of negative information about Israel, and no one really knew how or why. And so I said, okay, well, what are the methodologies? How are they speaking about Israel, and how are they communicating things? It was very aggressive. It was beyond books and stories and facts and figures, okay? And I said, all right, so this is something we can do. Let me take some of these lessons. And I looked very specifically, so I won't get too into detail, but the gentleman in the upper left has a tattoo that says Gaza across his, Aza for the Israelis, across his knuckles, okay? This guy leads a crew called Gaza. That's the name of his crew. Everyone who sings under his record label changes their name to whatever their first name was. Gaza is their last name. It's somewhat terrifying to see reggae concerts in Jamaica with 10, 20,000 people with lighters, like these flamethrowers in the air, chanting Gaza, 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 okay? They don't have a political stance, it's just kind of cool to them. Yasser Arafat, long deceased, has appeared in a number of rap videos. One in particular is a song called Arab Money, that's their pronunciation, not mine. DJ Khaled, who just became triple something platinum on his 3rd album, who is coming out and saying that he's, a proud Palestinian, and good for him, but this is something that your kids are listening to. And then of course, what you're going to soon find out we're known for, which is graffiti. You've got a lot of issues with a certain gentleman named Banksy. And I've got to move quicker, thanks. So moving quicker. That's where Artists for Israel started. We were like, let's use these methods of communication and get somewhere interesting. Let's turn the arts into our favor and use it. We're an advocacy organization. Not talking politics, just saying it. We did an event in 2009. It was not your typical Israeli advocacy event. There was 3 rappers who started performing, a couple girls for some reason took off their clothes and got body painted live. There was 50 pieces of graffiti artwork that was for sale. We were going to send the money to Bombshells and Stroke. That didn't work. because there were so many people. We had about 400 people come. They were all races, ethnicities. It was down here on the Lower East Side. It was an amazing event. But we said to ourselves, as we were painting the room back to all white, which is when we were all in our underwear painting and covered in white paint, that we really had a bully pulpit. We had an opportunity to speak to people. So we started an organization. Since then, we've worked in every art form. Here's an example. We did an indie rock concert, a bunch of DJ stuff. We did a life drawing class. We've done photography exhibits, fine art exhibits, theater. We sold out an off-Broadway theater, all doing a very simple pro-Israel message. So this is us. This is where I get to. Artists for Israel empowers the artists to express their support for Israel and its artistic and cultural freedoms. We work with the world's greatest artists. We're particularly within the urban contemporary art world. It's where I come from, and it's the people who support us. This is the goal of everything that we do. We're not talking politics. I'm not arguing with you about who and what and you know, the Balfour Declaration and 19 whatever. Our goal is simple. We say we support Israel, and if pushed any further, we support Israel because Israel has artistic and cultural freedoms. You can't get any better than that. That is our message. That's where we go. And what we've decided is, because of that, we're not an Israeli advocacy organization, so I apologize, Ido, because I know you thought we were, but we are an artist rights organization. We care about artist rights. Israel just happens to be a great place to support those rights. And so we've done murals around the country on different topics. This one, Voina, was a group of Russian street artists. Do you guys remember Voina? Anybody? Is it awesome? No? All right, Shani, I have to tell the story. They drew a giant phallus on the bridge, on the drawbridge, right near the KGB. So every time the bridge went up, giant penis was shown today. So anyway, that was all. So we did something for that. We stand against propagandists, politicians, and censors. There's a bunch of people who are using the arts to get at Israel. We've realized that they're the same people who are trying to manipulate art. So it's one and the same. So we're pointing that out to people's understanding. We're known in New York City for what we do with events. We have a whole way of doing things which are very unusual. Every program we do is an artist we've already spoken to and educated. They come up with the program. I have nothing to do with it. My job is, can we make this happen? Will we get arrested? And if the answer is yes and no, in that order, we do the program. We focus, I want to talk about this, and then we'll get to the fun stuff. You guys basically brought me here to show pictures, which you're going to see, and they're wonderful, they're mind-blowing, which is post-message. I would say we're the only organization, we don't care about what the message is, so when you talk to other advocates who are like, oh, you got to tell them this, you got to tell them this, none of you are going to remember what I said, and I'm going to pictures, because Shani's yelling at me. So we do missions to Israel, we've painted throughout the countries, we painted all the bomb shelters in Sderot. We painted across the country from Hebron to Tel Aviv, to Yerushalayim. Some of our murals have meaning for the local community. This was in B'nai Netzarim. They said, draw all the fruit that in a year you're going to come back and see that we've planted and that this is a fertile area. We've been in Hebron. We've painted throughout Judea and Samaria and different Arab villages. This is one of the ones I'm most proud of. Our first trip to Sderot, this was a bomb shelter. This picture just worked out perfectly. And there's images like this on every public bomb shelter in Sderot. This started in 2009. They keep our pictures up. When something happens to that shelter, when there's disrepair, they contact us to come back. This has made life better on the ground. Most recently, I'm wrapping up, we went to the Golan Heights. We wanted people to be aware of what was happening, the Syrian civil war, and of course it was starting to affect Israel. So we had 6 objectives, I guess, I wrote it, that we wanted to achieve. 1, we wanted to beautify communities. We did that. We create massive 30, 40, 50, 100-foot murals, all different themes. We have the world's greatest artists who come and do this. Make meaningful art. This is interesting. This was on a hospital that had been destroyed in the '67 war, and it's a 3-dimensional picture of a girl kind of trying to find out what happened. This hospital's just been sitting there empty since then, and there was a ton of other art around it. We want to turn these artists into advocates, right? Most of my artists are not Jewish. Most of them have many more tattoos than I do. Most of them are black, white, Asian, undefined. And so we bring in, they're more effective advocates than we will ever be, okay? And they come to Israel and they are inspired. There's a huge Israeli art and street art scene, graffiti, all of it. Can't get into it now because I don't have time. This one artist posted this picture on her Instagram. I'm not lying, this Instagram picture is going up. I'm tagging all of y'all. She got 11, I don't know if you can see it, 11,000 likes in an hour. I guarantee you, call the guys in Israel, they don't get 11,000 likes in any picture that they put up, okay? We're besting numbers put up by the consulate, okay? We have more followers than, what? Is good or bad? You can't hear me? I'll go through the whole speech again, you ready? So we're getting 11,000 followers alike. That was one of the 8 artists we brought. There are hundreds of thousands, up to millions of followers and people liking their work, who they trust, who are in their community. We find the top of them, and this is a small group that influences a much larger group. Blah, blah, blah. New York Times ran a 4-page story, Make Children Smile, and we're going on a new trip March 13th to celebrate Purim with a bunch of women's writers. I told you, I was here to come out.